Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Graphic Thoughts Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Panel. Right off the bat, want to apologize for the sound of the fan in the background. Way too hot to not have it on tonight, so gonna have to deal with that for at least most of this recording, if not all. If we do all of it in one take, then it's gonna be all. But if we do it on different days, then it might, depending on the weather, it might change. So we'll see. Today's episode is one that I've probably been looking forward to. I know I say that all the time, but Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is one of my favorite things of all time. I don't know anything. Honestly, it might be my favorite thing of all time. Just the idea of it is so fucking awesome. And we are doing a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles crossover this week. I'm going to just tell you now, there is going to be a good amount of TMNT coming up for the next couple episodes and weeks. Probably a good amount of crossovers too, because they do have a lot of crossovers. I think at some point, the people that made TMT comics just were like, well, we can get a lot of money and more people to read our comics if we just cross over with everything that's popular. And that might be, at least in my opinion, a big reason why the comic book that we're going to do today exists. So that's enough introduction for it. Let's get into it. The comic book that we are going to do for this episode is, drum roll for you, is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Stranger Things. I have wanted to do this for a really long time. This is one of my favorite crossovers, although when I read it, before I read it, I didn't expect it to, only because... So I've read TMNT for a very long time. I've read the original comics. I've read a bunch of comics after that. I've read just about every single crossover they've ever had. I've watched all the movies. I have watched all the cartoons, watched all the shows. I've done anything TMNT that's available, I've just about seen. So I obviously wanted to read this, but I wasn't sure how much I was going to be into it because at the time of reading it, and still to this day, I haven't watched all of Stranger Things. But the time of reading this book for the first time, I have never even watched Stranger Things. So I did think that was, I don't know. I wasn't sure if I was going to like that side of it. And then now I've only watched, I think, the first season, maybe 2 seasons of Stranger Things. I know I need to watch more of it, but I just haven't gotten around to it. So, obviously, I'm definitely more into the one side of it than the other side, but I thoroughly love this comic. I think it's probably my second favorite crossover that the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles have done. My first is absolutely the one with the Power Rangers, which, little spoiler, we are also going to be doing, probably not the next episode, but that will be the next episode, and then the next episode after that will be that, so super excited for that. But I can't wait to get into this breakdown. This is a pretty long comic arc, pretty interesting comic arc in my opinion too. They use the original Ninja Turtle comics style for the Ninja Turtles, which I thought was really good. But I think the Ninja Turtles in this one is kind of a combination with the IWDB comics, like the original run with them all having the red face masks, and then kind of 2003 animated shows. I think they kind of took inspiration from both of those and kind of combined the styles to create their own, if not something that's similar to what we've seen before, which I thought was really, really cool. Obviously, like I said, this is without a doubt one of, if not my favorite Ninja Turtles crossover. I just think the idea of it is really fucking cool. But that's enough yapping. Let's get right into it. There's really nothing else going on. I want to thank everybody that's been listening to the episodes on YouTube and on Spotify. It means the absolute world to me. Thank you guys a whole bunch more at the end of the video and episode, but can't wait to get into it. So let's go. Alright, so before we get into breaking down the story initially, I want to kind of a list of the characters we'll be seeing for the mostly in this story. On the TMNT side, the core team, obviously we have Leonardo, the leader, Raphael, the powerhouse, Donatello, Tech Genius, Michelangelo, Agile Wildcard, and we have their mentor Splinter, kind of their spiritual guide. Obviously, we know these characters, especially if you've watched and or read anything to do with these characters in the past. You have a pretty good understanding of the characters, so I'm excited to jump into what these characters get up to. On the Stranger Things side, we have the main psychic, Eleven. She has telekinetic powers, key to defeating the enemy. And then the rest of the Hawkins crew, we have Jim Hopper, Mike Wheeler, Dustin Henderson, and Lucas Sinclair. Obviously, we know all these characters from the show. If you've seen the show, I haven't seen the majority of it, so I'm not one of those people. But these characters are relatively the same exact characters from the show, almost to an exact T. So if you're familiar with those characters, then you'll be familiar with these characters. These are I'm not going to get into any of the villains. I want to let that kind of come across the story organically. But these are the main characters that we're going to be focusing on. Obviously, in a crossover of this nature, a lot of the times you'll start on one Earth and or start on the other. In this, it is a bit different, and we'll see why. So I can't wait to jump into this. Another thing I kind of wanted to talk about prior to jumping into this, only because I haven't covered any TMNT on here at all or Stranger Things, is kind of the history on both of the show Stranger Things and then also TMNT as a whole. So let's jump into that real quick. Obviously, basically everybody knows the origin story for the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It's very much tied to Marvel Comics as kind of a joke. Obviously, we have 4 baby turtles and a rat. They get exposed to a mysterious mutagen, or ooze. They mutate into human-sized intelligent turtles. Their rat becomes Splinter. This origin is consistent across most versions of the comics, the shows, and the movies. There are some alternate and or outworld stories out there, but for the majority, this is kind of set in stone. Splinter's role is, obviously, he trains the turtles in ninjutsu. He teaches discipline, honor, and balance. The 4 brothers, Leonardo obviously becomes the leader. He's very disciplined. Raphael, he is aggressive and emotional. Donatello, he is a genius inventor. Also, fun little fact for you guys, he is my favorite Ninja Turtle. Then we got Michelangelo, fun-loving but skilled. They grow up in a hidden New York City sewer system, obviously hiding from the outside world, coming out at night eventually to help protect the city. Early conflicts we see in TMNT are obviously the Foot Clan, main enemy organization led by Shredder, highly trained ninja army. This shapes the Turtles into real fighters, not just heroes. Kind of throughout the story, they get a lot of practice fighting these people because they're very much a constant thorn in the side, basically throughout any variation of TMNT. They are very much street-level heroes. They protect New York from crime, mutants, and secret threats. They become experienced in urban combat and stealth missions later on in the stories. Over time, TMNT stories glided beyond street crimes, more into science and mutations, experiments gone wrong, mutant enemies. Sci-fi elements ended up coming on in later. Aliens like the Krang in some version, and then advanced tech. Dimensional threats, portals, alternate realities, time travel, especially in the comics. Most of this is in the comics, these extra stuff, obviously because the comics have a lot more source material and just a lot more of things that took place in them. Obviously, the shows only were able to cover so much, and we haven't gotten really any good movies since the original 3, and only 2 of those were decent. But this is kind of a key connection, if you picked up on that just there. Obviously, they've been to a whole bunch of different dimensions. TMNT are not new to weird dimensions, so coming into Stranger Things dimension isn't necessarily the most peculiar thing they've come across. By the time of this crossover story, the Turtles are fully trained, experienced fighters used to mutants, science experiments, and dimensional anomalies. I think the world of Stranger Things in general fits pretty well with Ninja Turtles. Another dimension, obviously the Upside Down, government experiments, and creatures like the Demogorgon don't really seem too out of place in a TMNT story. From their perspective, this really much would just look like another mutation experiment gone wrong, but on a much larger scale, more dangerous scale, which I think is an interesting way to kind of bring it back to the comics, especially if you've read a whole bunch of TMNT comics. None of this is really a crazy thing to happen. It's just very, very cool that it's introducing a world that we also are fans of and enjoy. So there are a bit of comics in TMNT leading to this comic. Directly leading into the crossover, Donatello in a couple comics is already tracking unusual energy readings in New York City. Splinter senses a spiritual imbalance, and then the Turtles investigate the sewers A dimensional breach opens, and that's where the story starts. It's a pretty simple timeline. Obviously, the mutants get their powers, they train, they fight and protect the city for a good period of time, and then we get to this story. Stranger Things is a bit more complicated. Some people would mistakenly think, because a lot of the times stories like this are taken from comics, especially if there are comic tie-ins. Sorry, but no. Stranger Things, the show, premiered in 2016, and Dark Horse Comics started producing Stranger Things comics in 2018. So the comics actually came out after the show, and it kind of just expands on what the show is doing. There are kind of just side stories and side little arcs that kind of just fill in some of the blanks and help fill out the world of Stranger Things in the show and in the comics. Obviously, the origins of Stranger Things is the Hawkins Lab experiments, a secret government facility in Hawkins, Indiana. Scientists experiment on children with psychic abilities. The most important result of this is obviously Eleven. Opening the first gate during an experiment, Eleven makes contact with a creature. This tears open a portal into another dimension. This dimension is obviously the Upside Down. The Upside Down is basically a dark mirror of the real world, decaying, toxic, and controlled by a hive mind. Demogorgons, hunter creatures, mind flayer, the true controlling intelligence. The key idea of this is obviously it's not random, it's connected, and it's evolving. There's a central knowledge and control that's happening here. It's not just chaos. Early conflicts, like season 1 through 2. I am going to be spoiling a bit of shit for myself here, it seems. But people start vanishing, like Will Byers in the original story. The Demogorgon hunts across dimensions. Eleven uses her powers to destroy it, but the gate remains open and the connection persists. The Mind Flayer later emerges, a massive entity controlling everything inside the Upside Down. It begins trying to enter the real world, control humans. The Mind Flayer can infect minds, build networks in the real world. This is when it shifts from monster problem to an invasion problem. Ongoing experiments and instability. The government continues experiments. Portals became unstable and harder to contain. The boundary between the worlds weakens. We see a good amount of growth with Eleven throughout this story. Obviously, with all the characters, but a big growth through her. At first, she's very much an uncontrolled weapon. Later, she learns precision, emotional control, strategic use of her power. By the time this crossover, she's powerful but still vulnerable to overuse, still connected to the Upside Down. Leading into the crossover, key situation right before the story, the Mind Flayer is no longer focused only on Hawkins. It begins probing for new locations, larger population centers. Why? Obviously, just to expand its control a bit faster. The more people it can take over, the quicker it can take over. The trigger event here is 11 sensing a new portal opening up far away. This portal is bigger, less stable, and growing rapidly. The location of this portal is New York City. Obviously, both of these comics had little things kind of leading into them, introducing right up to when we get Turtles in the Upside Down, which is the crossover comic. But like I said, the Stranger Things, the show came out first, premiered in 2016 on Netflix, created by the Duffer Brothers. This is the original source of the story, characters, and the Upside Down. Obviously, the Stranger Things comic from Dark Horse Comics started in 2018, published by Dark Horse Comics, expands the universe with side stories, character backstories, and events happening off screen. There are some big differences, obviously. The show is canon, main story. The comics are supplemental material, extra details, not the core origin. Some of it, if not all of it, is not necessarily directly accurate. As far as we know, actually, I gotta look into that to see if this would even necessarily be canon in the Stranger Things universe. I do wanna figure that out. Yeah, as I figured, unfortunately, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Stranger Things crossover, Shells in the Upside Down, is not canon. It's not canon to either universe. The official canon for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comes from original Mirage Comics, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, IDW Comics, and TV shows and films, each with their own timelines. Your crossover story isn't part of any of those timelines, or this crossover story rather. For the Stranger Things side, the canon for the Stranger Things show is the Netflix show itself, and select tie-in material loosely is canon. Like, some of the comics are canon, some aren't. So the official crossover with the TMNT does exist, but it is not canon in the universe. Alrighty, jumping right into this breakdown, starting off with Chapter 1. Something in the sewers. The city above is loud, chaotic, but underground is controlled and very, very quiet. Obviously, this is where our heroes of the story take place, or live, rather. Leonardo is deliberately slowing the team down. He senses an imbalance, not physical danger quite yet, but something's pretty off. Donatello isn't just scanning randomly, his tech is picking up non-Earth-like electromagnetic distortion. The reading is almost like a heartbeat. It's very much showing that whatever it is, it's very large, and it seems to be almost something being controlled, maybe a connected system of some sort. Michelangelo starts making jokes. It's for comic relief, but it's not just for comic relief. It's very much kind of to mask the tension. He's the first one to feel fear and expresses it differently, obviously, than most people do. There's a temperature drop. It isn't gradual, it's very sudden. Their breath becomes visible. This mirrors how the Upside Down overrides reality instantly rather than blending with it. This kind of mirrors how the Upside Down overrides reality instantly rather than blending in with it in any sort of way. The walls start as brick, and then organic matter creeps over them. Veins, pulses slowly start to form over top. Donatello realizes that this is not an infection, it's replacement. We hear a Demogorgon in the background. Obviously, if you know about this, or if you know Stranger Things, you know what a Demogorgon is. It doesn't roar at first, it listens, and then it roars. It's kind of testing them. Raphael attacks first, very much an emotional response. He sees a threat and reacts immediately. Gets countered, shows his enemy is not street level. Leonardo shifts to defense, studies movement patterns, notices it doesn't dodge like a human, it phases and lunges. He realizes standard martial art or martial rhythm won't work. Like, no form of martial arts is really going to work on a being of this nature. Donatello, mid-fight, scans it. It's biological and dimensional readings. They seem to be overlapping. His conclusion is that it exists in two separate states at once, which is obviously making sense given Upside Down. You know how the Upside Down works if you've done Stranger Things. So we're understanding this. Obviously, this is new to them. Shortly after this, the Turtles, it's not like they lose the fight. They just choose to disengage, kind of study and learn what's going on, figure out what the fuck's up here. This is important because it shows maturity. Obviously, the Turtles have very much grown. Before this book, they've grown throughout the stories and the shows leading to this, so this is just that being shown. They recognize an unknown threat level and the portal flicker, not stable, not fully open. Something is testing expansion into New York City. They're not too sure what it is. This leads us to, I seem to have wrote chapter 3 in my notes, but I'm imagining it has to be chapter 2, and I just fucked up all the chapters after this. So we're going to say 2/3, because it could be either one. We're just going to continue running through the story. This is where we get the clash of worlds, so to speak. We get the kids from the Stranger Things and the Ninja Turtles kind of coming across each other for the first time. Raphael attacks because he's already frustrated from earlier in the fight. He knew known humans equals a possible potential threat. His arc here is very much impulse versus control, like it very much is throughout a lot of the stories with him. In this scene, Eleven lifts Raphael. Eleven doesn't attack violently, she restrains, but she doesn't crush him. This shows that she learned control. She's no longer the unstable weapon from earlier seasons. obviously showing that she's grown throughout the her story also, like they did with the Ninja Turtles earlier. Like I said, she didn't hurt Raphael, she just restrained him, stopped him from attacking. The Turtles realize that strength alone won't win here. The Hawkins crew realizes that these aren't enemies, they're defenders. This is something of a mutual recalibration, kind of trying to go forward and figure out what is the issue here and what's the problem. Yeah, and I wrote chapter 5 here, so I think I must have just combined the stuff that happened into the 2 chapters without writing the chapters down, and I just wrote them each individual, like 2 chapters separate. Weird way of doing it. I don't know why I did it like this. I was really, really, really tired when I wrote all these notes, so that's probably why, but I guess we'll see. But anyway, chapter 5, Into the Breach. We see them entering upside down New York City. This is not just Hawkins copy and paste. The key differences obviously are the skyscrapers are wrapped like they're melting. Obviously Hawkins doesn't really have skyscrapers. The sewer systems becomes a circulatory system. The implication here is that the Mind Flayer is adapting environmental scale. Obviously this environment is different than Hawkins, so we're seeing it basically use its brain and adapt to the new environment that it is now going into, which is a scary fucking thought. Truly, truly a scary thought. Each character reacts a bit differently. Leonardo starts focusing harder. His discipline shields his fear. Raphael gets more aggressive, rejects fear. Obviously, both of these two are acting very much in character of not only what we've seen so far in this book, but what we've seen in previous books, previous movies, previous shows. They always do a very good job at keeping these characters acting in character of what they do and or would do. So I always love when they can continue that on. Donatello overanalyzes, almost overwhelmed, if anything, and then Michelangelo goes quiet, which is very much the biggest tonal shift out of everything. This is very, very out of character for him. Obviously, everybody else is kind of doing what they always do. We see that Mikey is truly terrified. He truly doesn't understand what's going on, and he is scared. And this is a really, really scary thing to see Mikey. Mikey being quiet is serious danger. And that's really the only thing you can take away from that because of the character that Mikey is. And it's truly terrifying. This leads us to chapter 6, The Hive. They discover the hive. The structure is not random. It impulses in rhythm, like a brain almost, or a heart combined, kind of. There's tendrils connected outward. This is a central processing unit. They realize that the Mind Flayer isn't just invading, it's building infrastructure, preparing permanent occupation. It basically wants to take this place over for good. The tendrils seem to be going for Raphael specifically. Why they're going for him, the best guess I would have is that he is the strongest and emotionally unstable, and he is probably the easiest entry point mentally due to that. So that's, in my opinion, why they would do that or go after him directly, specifically. Once again, I do want to just point out that I am not going scene by scene, step by step, every character interaction, every single panel, I'm not doing any of that because I want you guys to go out and read these books. That is kind of the goal. Just to kind of break down the story and the main plot points and story elements and plot beats to kind of get you interested and intrigued into the story and to go reading it yourself. I am not here to sit down and write down notes for every single thing that's ever happened in this book just to go down every single thing part by part what's happening in the book. I'm not here to do that, and I don't think that's you guys would want me to do that. I think it's important to break it out like this and kind of give you the main meaning and arcs and reasons for the story, rather than just telling you every single detail of what happened in the story. So this leads us to chapter 7, The Breaking Point. 11 is fighting 2 battles, Eternal Mind Flayer and External Mind Flayer, and then eternal fear of losing control again. Her nosebleed isn't just physical, it signals emotional overload. Leonardo stops reacting and starts deciding. This is his full leader moment. No hesitation, no doubt. He decides to go straight forward. This leads us to Chapter 8, the final assault. The Mind Flare attack doesn't just attack physically, it uses hallucinations, emotional manipulation. Obviously, this is a very, very powerful way to attack. They put off individual illusions. Leonardo sees failure, his team dying. Obviously, this is Leonardo's biggest fear. If Leonardo were to lose his brothers, that would be the worst thing that could happen, because that means he wasn't the leader he thought he was. He wasn't good enough to keep them alive, and that would haunt him forever. Seeing his team die would absolutely be the worst thing to ever happen. I like to think of this scene as similar to the Scarlet Witch scene in Age of Ultron, where she made everybody see their nightmares, and then also in the comics she's done that occasionally also. Think of that very similar to that, how like Tony Stark saw his entire team die. That was obviously his biggest fear, saw the world get destroyed. That is Leonardo's biggest fear, is seeing his team die. Raphael sees himself losing control once again, obviously his biggest fear, especially this late into the TMNT series. Raphael has done a really good job at kind of getting himself past that point where he's just always breaking and falling apart. So his biggest fear is getting to a point where he breaks and there is no coming back. And that's always been his biggest fear, and his biggest downfall is his anger. So him being able to control it as well as he has, his fear is almost amplified the more control he gets over it, because it's almost like it's going to stop, and then it's going to happen, and it's going to be the worst it's ever been. So Donatello sees logic failing, obviously his worst fear. He's a science guy. He believes in calculations and logic and reason. And if all of this fails, he basically loses all meaning. What is there left for him to trust, for him to believe in, for him to support, for him to strengthen his own grip on reality? He has nothing. So that would truly be the worst thing that could happen to him too. And this is probably the one that hit me specifically the hardest. Specifically because I read The Last Ronin, which we will get to much later on. Michelangelo sees himself alone. And this hits me really, really hard, because we do eventually, obviously in The Last Ronin, see him alone and how haunted and damaged he is. And that's truly a really sad sight. So this hit me really, really hard. And obviously, even in what we've seen prior to this, Michelangelo loves his brothers. He's afraid sometimes, and he'll use his comedy to kind of help himself get through that. But he is always there for his brothers, and he loves them to death. And losing them would truly be the worst thing possible. Michelangelo being alone would be the worst thing possible, because then he would be stuck with just his mind and his thoughts, and they would eat him alive. This is very much tailored fear. Every single one of them, fear that was shown to them, is the worst thing that they could possibly see. And I think it's very, 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 very done well. This leads us to Chapter 9, The Strike. Donatello's plan is very, 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 very much logic-based. He doesn't destroy the hive directly. He overloads the connection network, meaning the Mind Flare loses coordination. The turtles create an opening through coordinated combat, 11 channels focused telekinesis. This is physical plus psychic fusion attack, or a physical plus a psychic fusion attack, leading to them being able to take down and stop the hive mind. This leads us to Chapter 10. There is no celebration. Everyone understands this was just one battle. Donatello detects leftover energy, meaning that the Mind Flare learns from failures, adapts. This means that this isn't the last city it is going to try and destroy in this nature. So probably look forward to more Stranger Things crossover comics. I don't remember if there are any more. I've never actually looked into it. I read this specifically because I was into Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, not really because of anything to do with Stranger Things. So, but that is going to do it for the breakdown of that story. I do have a little surprise story after that I'm going to get to in just a moment, so let's talk about that. But I really enjoyed this crossover. I think it did a really good job at introducing all the characters to, if anybody was for some reason reading this without knowing all the characters, I think it did a good job at getting the characters to like mend together very well. It didn't feel like any of the characters were written differently than they should have been or out of place of where they should have been. Everything seemed to flow together very well. I liked how they did the worlds like combining. I liked the way they did New York City being in the Upside Down, how it was more, I don't know, things we didn't see before. How obviously they had the skyscrapers, they had the whole subway system, so there was other things that the hive mind had to take over and use to take over the city like he did in the Upside Down. So I thought that was really cool visual. The artwork in this story is very beautiful. I did I've used a couple of them for my early on posts on my Instagram. Truly some of the most beautiful artwork in this book. And then at the end of the book there's a lot of like extra art that, oh my god, there's some amazing art in that too. It's truly some of the best art panel and by panel in this book. So if nothing else, if you're not even going to read it for the story, just read it to look at the pictures, because it is a truly beautiful book. Obviously, like I said, this isn't the first crossover or the last crossover that TMNT did. There are a lot of them, and there are a lot that we are going to do. The next one actually, before I get into that, I do want to kind of touch base on where the characters went after this story. Obviously, we did realize it's not canon, but I guess where in this universe where the characters would have went after this. Obviously, there is no official aftermath. Like I said, this isn't an official canon crossover. There's no official canon, so there's no official aftermath. But we can kind of map out a logical in-universe epilogue based on how both worlds normally kind of operate. TMNT, I'd argue that Leonardo takes the events very seriously and is now begins more of a structure to patrols, training for non-physical enemies. Internally, I'd imagine he becomes more cautious, realizes not every fight can be solved with skill alone or strength. Raphael, probably the most affected by the Mind Flayer encounter. After the effects, he struggles with anger, the fact he was almost controlled, and trains harder, but also starts listening to Leonardo just a bit more. This is very much growth through fear. Donatello becomes obsessed with Anomaly. What he does next is builds dimensional scanners, portal detection tech. Big implication, he now believes other dimensions are real and ongoing threats live and could reveal themselves inside of them. Michelangelo is quietly shaken, even if he doesn't show it. The changes, the jokes come back, but slightly forced at first. Gains a deeper appreciation for his family and normal moments in general. And Splinter interprets the event spiritually. His view, the upside down, an imbalance in the natural order. What he does is begins training the turtles in mental discipline, resistance to psychological attacks. On the Stranger Things side, 11 completely drained after destroying the Hive core. After effects, temporary loss and weakening of powers, emotional exhaustion, but big realization would be that the Mind Flayer is bigger than Hawkins. Jim Hopper treats this like a national level threat now. He starts pushing for more awareness, more containment, more containment efforts rather. He's no longer sees this as just a Hawkins problem. Mike Wheeler focused on Eleven's recovery. Obviously, he's very romantically involved with her. Emotional support keeps her grounded after the trauma. Dustin Henderson, another fun fact, my favorite person in Stranger Things is Dustin. My brother's name is also Dustin. He becomes fascinated with the turtles, keeps notes on their attack, their fighting style. If they met again, he'd 100% try to work with Donatello. Lucas Sinclair, another reason why he's my favorite. Lucas Sinclair becomes more tactical, realizes and treats everything as the threats are escalating. They need to be better prepared for the next time. The threat afterward, Mind Flayer not fully destroyed. What actually happened is the Hive Nod in New York City was destroyed, but the Mind Flayer itself exists across dimensions. It can rebuild itself. and it's important because it now has data on the turtles. Remaining creatures, some Demogorgons may have been trapped or escaped before the portal closed. This leaves small lingering threats in New York City, possibly. Long-term consequences, New York City mostly returns to normal, but small anomalies may still appear. Dimensional stability, barrier between worlds, weaker than before, meaning the future breaches are easier and possible. We might get some sort of crossover again of this or another crossover in nature. Final character impact, I'd argue that TMNT learned not all enemies are physical, strategy must include mental and dimensional threats, and Stranger Things crew learned that the Upside Down can spread far beyond Hawkins, and they're not alone in fighting it. Even though it's not canon, the ending sets up a perfect sequel, in my opinion. Possibilities, the Mind Flare adapts to New York City, Donatello builds portal tech, 11 trains to control power better, and a second bigger invasion. I do think a possible cool sequel to this story would be like Shredder teaming up somehow with the Mind Flare. I don't know how that would happen, but I think if they did something of that nature, that'd be kind of cool. But let's get right into the next breakdown. The next breakdown for this episode, it is honestly for some of these comics, they're not the longest for the breakdown, so we probably will be pushing a couple together. Alrighty, once again, I want to apologize for the fan in the background. But like I said, we're doing another breakdown, and this one will be along the same lines. It is a crossover. It is Turtles of the Gray Skull. It is obviously, if you haven't picked up by the name, Ninja Turtles and He-Man crossover. Turtles of the Gray Skull. One of my favorite crossovers. I know I said that about the last one, but He-Man is really, really cool. I love He-Man. I've been slowly collecting some of the new remakes of the original figures for He-Man, and I'm really happy about that. So I was excited to do this one. I actually found out about this one like maybe a month ago, and I read it immediately, and I was like, fuck, I gotta do this with Bob. So I figured this was a good episode to do it in, especially since it's the introduction of Ninja Turtles to the podcast. So I'm excited to jump into that. Like I did for the last one, I'm going to give a little quick summary of the origins and story leading up to this for He-Man. Obviously we did, for the most part, do that for Ninja Turtles. Also going to talk about whether or not it's canon. So we're going to talk about all that prior to actually jumping into the breakdown, and then we'll jump into the breakdown. So we are going to start off with the He-Man and the Masters of the Universe world. So we're going to jump right into the history of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. Starting off directly in the early 1980s. It was a real-world creation. Very, very different. Well, similar in some cases, but very different to a lot of other universes and toy universes afterwards. They started with the toys. The toys started as an action figure line, and it was created by Mattel around 1982. The toys came out before the show came out, before the movies came out, before any of that, which I thought was really interesting looking into this. I didn't know that prior to looking stuff up and figuring stuff out for this episode. The cartoon was launched in 1983, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. It introduced the main story and the characters, made He-Man a huge pop culture icon. Obviously, people that if the toys came out first, I'd imagine they didn't sell as good as they did afterwards due to people not being aware of the characters and the plot and the story of all the characters. So obviously you would imagine that would make a difference going afterwards. People would become big fans of the He-Man character and then want the toys even more. The world of Eternia. Eternia is a planet where magic plus advanced technology exist together. Eternia obviously is the planet where this entire story and world takes place. The mix of both of these kind of define the entire franchise. He-Man's origin. Prince Adam is chosen to wield the Sword of Power. By invoking Grayskull, he becomes He-Man. Castle Grayskull, source of his power, center of all the conflict in the world. The main conflict, the main bad guy, is Skeletor. Skeletor is fucking sick. He's an evil sorcerer trying to take Castle Grayskull. Never really made too much sense in my opinion, especially looking back at it now that I'm older. He had a castle. What did he really need Castle Grayskull for? But He-Man defends Eternia from Skeletor's constant attacks, basically throughout the stories. Expansions and reboots. In the 1980s, there was the cartoon classic. In 2002, there was a reboot that kind of deepened and made the story a little more serious. Masters of the Universe Revelation is a modern continuation. Each version adds more lore and more character depth. A simple timeline would be, for one, the toy line created in 1982. The cartoon defines the story in 1983. He-Man becomes the protector of Eternia. Ongoing battle with Skeletor. Multiple reboots to expand the universe. He-Man, in my opinion, is the ultimate hero, powered by magic. He is fucking amazing. Masters of the Universe is a world of sci-fi and fantasy mixed together. It's a very powerful world, and it's been going on. Obviously, you said 1982 is when it started. It's been going for a really long time. Obviously, we got the live-action movie with the guy that played Punisher. I forget his name. Ralph Lundgren, maybe? And we've got a couple things since, and I think there's a show happening now, but other than that, there are the comics. I do want to get into when the comics first started. The first comics actually were similar to how Toy Biz with the original Marvel Legends lines did little comic books in the back of each figure you bought. The first He-Man comics came out in 1982, published by DC Comics through the mini comics packed with the toys. These were short origin-style stories included with Mattel action figures. In 1982 to 1983, mini-comics introduced He-Man, Skeletor, and Castle Grayskull. These versions were actually a bit darker and more primitive than the cartoon ended up becoming. In 1983, DC Comics launched a full issue, not just mini-comics, of a series. This helped expand the lore beyond toys. Later comic eras, like in the 2000s, new comics tied to the 2002 cartoon reboot. And then in 2010, DC Comics brought He-Man back again with more modern storytelling, crossovers like TMNT, like we're about to get into. Like I said, He-Man comics started in 1982 and kind of have evolved since then into what we know now. Obviously, we know the history of the Ninja Turtles. We went over that earlier. I do want to go over to how each characters were led to this story, so let's do that real quick. So, what led to this story happening? First, I want to talk about kind of the real-world reason, and then we'll get into kind of the lore and actual story reason, like in universe reason. Real world reason, it just kind of made sense. Shared publisher opportunity. DC Comics had access to Masters of the Universe license from Mattel. TMNT, published by IDW Publishing, was already doing crossovers. Like we've already went over, they've done a lot of crossovers, and we're going to do a whole bunch more, or go over a whole bunch more. The result was the crossovers were popular, like Batman and TMNT, so this was a natural next step. Why they worked so good together, these two both are 80s icons, toy-based franchises, and action-heavy worlds. Kind of with a twist, TMNT is science and mutation, He-Man is magic and fantasy, so that contrast makes a strong crossover hook. It very much kind of makes you interested. In story, the setup is a bit different. Step 1, Skeletor's obsession with power. Skeletor is always trying to gain control of Castle Grayskull, but in this story, he pushes further than usual, uses unstable experimental magic. Step 2, it opens a dimensional rift. Skeletor's magic goes wrong. It tears open a portal between dimensions. This isn't controlled teleportation, it's chaotic and pulls things randomly. This leads to TMNT getting pulled in. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are in New York City, suddenly. They're dragged through the rift. They land on Eternia. And that's where we'll get into the rest of the story, going into the actual breakdown. But similar to the Stranger Things one, there is an in-universe logical reason for it taking place. It's not just, oh, we're here now, we've always been living in the same universe. So I do like that, but I'm excited to jump right into this breakdown. It should be really exciting, so let's do it. Alrighty, guys, so let's jump right into the breakdown of Turtles of Grayskull. Obviously, the He-Man and Ninja Turtles crossover. It is a 4-issue miniseries, so we can kind of break down, or it's a 4-issue miniseries. Starting with issue 1, Strangers of Eternia. We open in a battle for Grayskull. We open in Eternia with He-Man defending Castle Grayskull. Skeletor is attacking with dark magic. Not very different than anything else we've seen in He-Man prior. Very normal setup. This sets up, obviously, kind of just context. This establishes Eternia, high fantasy, magical realm, and the stakes, control of ultimate power. Obviously, they're both trying to keep control of Castle Grayskull. During the battle, Skeletor uses unstable magic. It creates a dimensional rift. It's important because this is not controlled magic. This is magic that we haven't even seen Skeletor use in this universe before. It pulls in random elements from other universes or other worlds. Obviously, you can see where this is going. This is the arrival of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are pulled from New York City. They land in Eternia, confused, out of place, and very, very confused. Their first reactions, Raphael is immediately hostile, as he obviously would be. Donatello is fascinated. He's very, very curious about what's going on here. Leonardo is cautious, as he would be as the leader. And Michelangelo is very overwhelmed, but also very curious. This leads us to the first clash of the story. It's something of a misunderstanding. Turtles versus He-Man. A fight breaks out. He-Man is overwhelmingly strong, but the Turtles' speed and coordination kind of keeps them in the fight, if that makes sense. The Turtles quickly realize that He-Man is way stronger than anything they have fought physically, which is very interesting to kind of put into perspective, because if you just think about the things that the Turtles have come across in TV shows, movies, and comics up to this point, like we got Bebop and Rocksteady, we got Super Shredder, we got Normal Shredder, we got the entire Foot Clan, we got the Krang, we got a whole bunch of other fucking people that are very powerful. Nothing compared to He-Man. And pretty insane to think about. They stop fighting when Skeletor's forces attack again. This is something of a turning point. Mutual respect forms. They agree to fight the bigger threat, which is Skeletor. This will lead us into issue 2, Power and Mutation. The Eternals explore Eternia. Obviously, there's a pretty big contrast between the Turtles world and the world of Eternia. TMNT is very much science fiction and mutation. Eternia is very much just magic. Donatello struggles a lot with this. Obviously, his logic with science and all of that doesn't necessarily apply fully here, and he very much doesn't really know what to do with himself because of that. Directly after this is when we figure out about Skeletor's plan. Skeletor learns about the Turtles. He sees that their mutagen is the potential power source for them. That's what gave them their abilities. Obviously, it did. And there's a possibility that mutagen could potentially be used to power him up some kind of way. His goal is to combine magic and mutagen. This is dangerous because it could create superpowered mutants. Obviously, this hasn't been done before. Mutants aren't a thing in the He-Man universe, and superpowers technically are a thing in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles universe. We'll see why, but later on. Not later on in this book, but later on in the episodes. But they don't have superpowered mutants over there. Skeletor begins to experiment using the Ooze. This results in his minions beginning to mutate, becoming stronger and much, much, much more unstable. He-Man and the Turtles train together, realizing that this is kind of their only chance to stop the Skeletor once he's got as far as he's gotten into this point. Leonardo learns leadership from He-Man. Raphael respects his strength, and Michelangelo adapts quickly to new weapons, combat styles, and cosmetic. If you actually look at the toy line that came out from this, that I do want to get all the figures for. I don't have any of them. I saw them when they originally came out when I was younger, but I just never got around to reading the book, so I didn't know really much about the figures. But the Michelangelo, and I don't know if I ever saw it in the other ones or remember the other ones, I don't remember what they had, but Michelangelo had a He-Man like headpiece, like hairpiece, that you could put on his head so he could have a wig, and I thought that was really, really fucking funny. This will lead us into issue 3. Skeletor escalates. Skeletor successfully creates mutant enhanced warriors. These are stronger than normal enemies, much, much harder to defeat. Obviously, He-Man and his allies have been fighting, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, have been fighting Skeletor for decades and decades and decades. So, obviously, he's already strong and very resilient. So, for him to be superpowered now and his crew, that's fucking terrifying. And they're very lucky to have the Turtles there to help them. But will they, and all of them, even be enough to stop them is the question. This is where the full conflict begins. The Turtles come into combat very tactical, moving very quickly. The Eternian Warriors are just using brute strength and magic, trying to just kind of outpower them. Leonardo very much starts thinking like a battlefield commander, trying to come up with the best strategies and game plans to push the enemy back and take out as many as they can without losing any of their people. Raphael starts to channel his aggression a bit more effectively, using it to take out the enemies in a precise way rather than lashing out. And Donatello begins merging science with magic, understanding it all in a different way than he did prior. Skeletor's army pushes closer to Grayskull. This is where the stakes rise. If he wins, he controls both magic and mutation. If he wins, he also gets Castle Grayskull. Issue 4, The Battle for Grayskull. In the final assault, there's a massive battle at Castle Grayskull. Skeletor's ultimate form, he enhances himself using mutagen, results in a hybrid magic plus mutation. Probably will use a mutated Skeletor for the... Actually, no, I lied. This is a surprise little story in the end of an actual breakdown, so there won't be anything artwork for any of it for this book. But I do recommend you go and read it because it's very, very cool. The final fight, He-Man versus Skeletor. Raw power versus corrupted power. The Turtles continue to fight the army back to keep them away from He-Man and let He-Man fight Skeletor. The turning point in the fight, Donatello identifies the mutagen is unstable in a magical system. Its weakness is if they overload it. Basically, if they get them to use their magic consistently, continuously, without stopping, it's going to eventually use too much of it and have to regroup, basically. Their final plan is to combine He-Man's power, Donatello's strategy. They result in Skeletor's mutation backfiring, and Skeletor is defeated. The dimensional rift gets closed. The Turtles get sent back to New York City. Both sides very, very much changed by the experience. For the Turtles, I think they went through a lot of growth in this story. I think Leonardo becomes more of a leader. I think Raphael learns a bit more of a strength. I think Donatello expands a little bit beyond science. Now he's more understanding of magic and more accepting of it, so he's more able to come up with plans for things that are going to kind of be outside of his wheelhouse, out of his box, if you will. And then Michelangelo adapts creatively. He new wardrobe, new weapons, new fighting style. Skeletor's core idea is power without limits. He represents corruption of both science and magic in a way. If all you're looking for is the power and the glory, that's very rarely what you're going to end up getting. I think Turtles of Grayskull works so well because it contrasts two completely different worlds, then forces them to combine strengths to survive together. It's not like they just took one of these things out of the other universe and that's it. Both of these universes played a giant role in the way this story went, and I thought that was really, really cool. I've always really, really liked this story. And to get back to what I was saying earlier, whether this is canon or not, little drum roll for you, not canon. A little spoiler, a lot of these aren't going to be canon. A lot of these crossover universe stories are just taking place in their own universe. Just because a lot of the times it'll either fuck with or future stories will fuck with those stories, so it'll make it non-canon, or it's just easier in general to make it non-canon from the start. But it's not canon to the He-Man nor the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles universes. For the TMNT side, for the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, main canon depends on the versions from Mirage, IDW, and the shows, some movies. Turtles of Grayskull is not part of those core timelines. It's treated as an alternate universe crossover story. On the Masters of the Universe side, canon varies by version. In the 1983 show, 2002 reboot, and in the modern series, this crossover is not part of any official main continuity. What it actually is, the comic is officially licensed and published by DC Comics, but exists outside main storylines, designed as something of a what if these worlds met scenario. This is, like I just said, this is kind of how crossovers usually work, of this nature usually work. Most crossovers like this don't affect main continuity, reset at the end, characters return to their worlds, focus on the fun concept plus the character interactions, and don't really worry about the world that it takes place in. So, like I said, not canon, but it is an official crossover story. Actually, let me get a list of TMNT crossovers that are canon, because it's a very small list. Well, I did just look into it, and like I said, the short answer is almost none of them. The TMNT crossovers are main. Almost none of the TMNT crossovers are main canon. They're usually official, but in separate universes. For the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle canon, depends on the version. The Mirage Comics is obviously the original. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the IDW Comics, the modern main comic continuity. And then each TV show, movie has its own canon. Crossovers almost never really fit into these main timelines. Occasionally it will, but very rarely. Like I said, He-Man, Turtles of the Grayskull, What If style story, not a canon. Other crossovers like Ghostbusters and Power Rangers are the same deal. They're fun stories, but they're not part of the core timeline. We will be doing both of those. Actually, the next episode will be both 1 and 2 of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Power Rangers, so be excited for that. And then at some point we will also do both of the Ghostbusters crossovers. Semi-canon, and then there's some flexible cases. Sometimes crossovers happen within a publisher's shared continuity, but still aren't essential canon. Some examples of this would be some IDW crossovers reference events loosely, but they are still treated as side stories, optional continuity. You can kind of think of them as canon unless ignored later. Why crossovers aren't canon? I think a lot of it honestly just comes down to different rights owners. DC, IDW, the Mirage Comics, and then Nickelodeon, etc. A lot of different people own certain rights to the Ninja Turtles licensing. So I think it's just easier to kind of do their own stories how they do them without having to make them all fit together into a set world. Different universes and rules, and then they would break continuity if fully included. A lot of the stories do kind of go against each other if you actually look at the continuity. Alrighty, so that is going to do it for the breakdown for Turtles of the Grayskull and breaking down whether or not any TMNT crossover is canon. Obviously, we found out it's basically not. I want to thank everybody once again that's been following and watching on Spotify. It means the absolute world to me. And then same with YouTube. YouTube's been doing really good. You guys seem to be really into the manga episodes, which I really enjoy. We will be getting back to those probably in a month or so. I just need to catch up on some reading, that's all. But yeah, I'm really excited for it. Obviously, I said that next episode will be the 2 issues of Power Rangers and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And then following that, I don't remember what I was going to do. Oh, I do. I was going to do Flashpoint. So be ready for that. I'm really excited for those. And then after that, I'm probably going to continue with some of these TMNT crossovers. I really do like the original TMNT comics. I love the crossovers. Probably do some of the original comic run too, from like your OG, the Mirage comics. That would be kind of cool. But keep an eye out for all of that. This episode, I don't know what day of the week it is that it's coming out, but it'll be up and we'll be back on track. All of these will be up by, I don't know, man. These will all be up. I'm getting back into the swing of things and everything's getting back under control, so I'm moving and stuff, so it's been a bit tricky, but we're gonna get everything down. So thank you everybody for listening, and I hope you all return for the next episode and continue to watch. I appreciate everybody and have a wonderful day. Dr. Panel out.